Lordy, this is Purge, bringing you guys a patch analysis. That's right, there is a new patch, and before we go to anything, the most important thing, it's so cold in this room. I shaved it last night. I'm really sorry. It had to happen. I did it on stream for fun, kind of, and success was accomplished. I got about 279 upvotes out of it, so mission accomplished. I've been farming upvotes. It's a pretty big investment, like 2 months here, but definitely paid off. I do miss it already. I think I'm gonna start going it back. So if you guys are sad about it, it's okay. It will return. All right. So there's a new Dota patch, version 6.78. This will be the patch that was told to be applied before TI3. So let's take a look at some things. Some of these things I've looked over, and other things I have not. So like the new heroes, there's 2 new heroes. I haven't even touched them yet. So let's take a look at them. We have a strength hero on Sentinel. Starting damage is pretty good. Armor is 4. He's a melee hero. Base attack, pretty okay movement speed. And there's the strength gain, 2.9. Agility gain is pretty low, and intelligence gain is okay. So I don't care. Okay, stone collar level an 8. What is going on? Raises a stone from the depths of the earth. Stay in battle. Creates a rock consuming a stone charge, and the charge replenishes at a rate of 1 per 24, 5 seconds. Lasts up to 2 minutes with the max 6 rock tips. I feel like I've read something like this before. Cast range is 1400, and the cooldown is 0, so you can apparently cast them really fast. Up to 6 rocks. It doesn't do anything but is used with its other abilities. Okay, this is an innate ability. You don't put skill points into it, but you do have it at all levels. So you cast rocks. I don't know what they do yet. Turns into a boulder and begins spinning in place to build momentum. After 0.6 seconds, he launches himself 800 distance in the direction he's facing. Damaging units pass through, but stopping if he collides with the enemy hero or is stunned. Rolling over a rock will add momentum, increasing roll distance, speed, damage, and adding a slow to the hero you collide with. So, rock slow, roll distance, speed, impact AoE, mana cost, and cooldown. Okay, so you use this with interaction on the rocks, I think. This is like one of these heroes that looks weird to understand unless you actually see him played, so it might be a little tough for me to understand this yet, but I can read over the other skills. Boulder smash target ally, enemy or rock, melee range. Slams an ally or rock with his mace, so knocking them away from him, and damaging enemies the slam target collides with. So basically you can drop a rock and you can slam it into people, or you can drop a rock and snowball into it. It kind of sounds like snowball. And then you can go faster if you snowball through one of the rocks. Slammed rocks travel faster than fleshy targets and also silence impacted enemies. Silence duration is 5 seconds with a rock, which is a pretty huge duration here. And the damage scales okay. It's all magic damage, I assume. It doesn't actually say. Unless I'm crazy. Geomagnetic grip. Target ally or rock runs a magnetic charge through a rock, quickly pulling them to him. Enemies struck by the target will be pulled. Being pulled will be stunned and will also be dealt damage if the pulled target is a rock. I wonder if you can like shoot a rock forward and then snowball into the rock and then geomagnetic the rock back. Might be something like this. It does a stun, a little bit of rock damage, pull speed, cast range, mana cost. I can't even like fathom this hero unless I would see him played. Magnetize a small area, cause them to take damage over time for a short duration. They become energized and explode. Man, I can't even like. I'm not even gonna read this. Like my understanding of this is pretty. I would really have to like look this down on paper, see him played a bit. I'm having trouble understanding. Intelligence hero, nerfed the Oracle. Sentinel, intelligence, int hero, pretty low armor. Range is really good. Movement speed is okay. Base attack is actually. Is this better or worse? I can't remember which way it goes. I think this is better. And his scaling, edgy is pretty low, strength is kind of ish low, but his int gain is okay. Don't care. Channels power into a bolt of scarring energy for up to 3 seconds and release the bolt, strikes the targeted enemy, dealing damage and purging an AoE around the purge duration is equal to the time spent channeling. Okay, so this does a slow and it does damage. It does a channeling, is that correct? Yeah, channeling up to 3 seconds. AoE cooldown. Happens for the damage, and also removes Fate's Edict and Purifying Flames, which must be his other 2 skills. Fate's Edict, rendering them unable to attack, or granting them 100% spell resistance. Oh, it's an ally. So 100% spell resistance, but they can't attack, and they increase the damage they take from other damage types by 50%. Can be cast on both allies and enemies. Interesting. So, you basically make it so your ally can't attack, but they take way less magic damage, but they take more damage from physical HP removal, stuff like that. Universal, pure damage. So you could hypothetically use it on an ally that's being bursted by a hero like Lina, and then hopefully they would not take too much physical damage. It sounds really interesting. You'd have to know a lot about damage types to use this effectively. Cooldown is 14, range 700, and the duration is up to 6 seconds. And you also prevent them from attacking for that time period. I wonder if there's other heroes this would be good at. You could cast it on an ally like that gets Reaper scythed. There's a lot of options you could use this on. Interesting. Burns away impurities from the target, dealing heavy damage and causing them to regenerate life. This is like a full support here. This is really cool. I'm excited now. Can we cast on both allies and enemies? Damage. So it looks kind of like Shadow Word. Almost exactly, actually. Okay, so you can damage an ally with this pretty heavily. But it will cause them to regenerate. Let me whip out the calculator quick, see if this is... Oh, this has another really cool mechanic that I can talk about in a sec. I've experienced this in another game before, and it was really fun. So, oops, that's not correct. 44 times 9. So, you actually heal slightly more HP. The mechanic that I played was in a game called City of Villains, and it was like this, what was it, an illusion damage or something, where you do a big source of damage, but some of it would heal back later. So, hypothetically, you can actually use this to burst down enemies, because you'll do all the damage up front, I assume, and then they'll regenerate it over 9 seconds. They'll actually gain HP in the long run, but if you're using it for burst, it's actually really useful. You can also use it to remove debuffs from your allies. What would be a good example? Like, I don't know, like you could remove a stun most likely. I assume the fact that it says burns away impurities means that it does remove debuffs and stuff, but I'm not completely sure on this. It also says at the bottom here that damage is non-lethal, so that means you can't kill allies with it. So for example, if somebody's at like 200 HP or something, and they're about to die from A ulti, you could hypothetically cast Purifying Flames on them, and it should remove that buff, put them down to 0 HP, and then they'll heal up 300. So this could be really cool. It's kind of like Shadowgrave, but a little different. It's really, really awesome. I bet you could stack Shadowgrave with this ability really fun. You could like save anybody no matter what. False Promise goes on allied, alters their destiny, delaying all damage, healing, and regeneration effects on them until a fatal False Promise ends. They're granted invisibility while attacking and moving, and they remove all negative status effects. Man, this guy sounds really fun. The delaying healing is doubled when it is provided at the end of the duration, so big range, duration is huge, mana cost, cooldown. All damage and healing happen immediately once the buff ends. The damage is lethal and is credited to the original damage sources. So it delays all damage, healing, and regeneration effects on them until False Promise ends. Okay, so basically you make your ally invisible. They can attack and move, similar to Slark ulti. It removes all negative status effects when applied, so as you initially cast it, it removes the negative status effects. But all healing and damage and regen that's applied to them is, like, it's going to basically look like you're doing the guy no damage until the buff ends, and then everything is applied. The delayed healing is doubled when it is provided at the end of the duration. Is that this other thing? So this might mean that healing is doubled by the end of the duration, and the damage is just 1 times. I'm guessing that's kind of what it looks like. Cooldown's really low, by the way, 20. So basically what we'll probably end up seeing with this hero is, like, if you cast False Promise on them, as well as Purifying Flames, they'll take the 360 damage, but it won't apply because it doesn't apply right away. The healing will be doubled, so really they'll be healed for like 600, I think. Which actually makes this less dangerous, basically. And you can have a lot of debuffs for allies, which is really cool. There's actually not very many of those in Dota at all. Like, an example would be like Abaddon. His aphotic shield can remove debuffs, or remove buffs that are on your hero from enemies. Like Diffusal Blade is another example where it can remove buffs and debuffs, but it's a very small portion of Dota, so throwing this hero in is actually going to hopefully open people's brains a little bit and have you be more aware of what can and can't be debuffed. And this hero could definitely be used as counters. I don't necessarily know if it'll be useful. This ability, Purifying Flames, could be used to burst people down, but if you don't do it immediately, then there could be problems. The cooldown is pretty low. The mana cost is tiny, actually, so this maybe could be some kind of a tri-lane hero. I could possibly see this. This ability is really interesting. Oh yeah, and he actually has another nuke, so he could possibly see some nuke play while also being able to debuff, because you could channel this ability, Fortune's End. It does 300 damage AoE, so you could do 300 damage here, and then you could also cast Purifying Flames, which as a whole does 660 damage burst, but this will be healed back, of course. So, really cool. I like this hero. He sounds pretty fun. Sounds like pretty high skill cap. kind of like Dazzle, but more offensive potential and a little bit less AoE. So I can't wait to play. Okay, let's get on to the items and the hero changes. These are probably more impactful. New heroes are added to Dota, usually about 4 to 6 a year, something like that. So if you guys ever get bored, that's about how often they get added, and it's going to continue like that for the rest of the time, I'm sure. Until Dota stops being patched. Hopefully never. Arc Warden, I still don't really know how this guy works. It's now visible to enemy players as the fake. Okay. And one of his spells is decreased AoE. But let's talk about all the other heroes that I know. Axe Counter Helix gets a very slight buff. The cooldown decreased, which means that he can spin faster. I like this change a lot. Ancient Apparition gets a buff to Ice Vortex. His Ice Blast AoE is increased. This is a base AoE, so at a short range for his Ice Blast, it's a bigger AoE, and they add an Aghanim Scepter. This changes the Ice Blast duration is increased to 17 seconds. So this means when the A ulti lands, the debuff that's on your hero that provides minus heal and does damage over time, it's going to be huge duration increase. So that means that if you can land this in the team fight on multiple heroes, it gives your team a huge advantage to win, because then you only have to get your opponents to like 10%, and it gives you a much bigger time to do that. Not to mention that there is damage over time from the Ice Blast debuff, so it's going to really increase the amount of damage that Ice Blast does. So I really like this pickup. It's also, Aghanims is pretty good on A as well, because he definitely is a squishy hero, so giving him more HP and stats is really good. Bat Rider vision is decreased. This is a daytime vision, so his overall vision in daytime is now 400 less. So a slight nerf to Bat Rider for his ability to find targets, which means that it's going to be a little harder for him to initiate. So same vision at nighttime, but this is going to hurt him just a little bit here. And might also hurt his mid-roll as well, because he has to get 400 units closer to a rune now. Unless you have a word, of course. Flame Break mana cost is also quite drastically increased. This is going to mean more mana problems from him in the early game. Beastmaster, Greater Hawk invisibility fade time decrease, so slight buff to Beastmaster. Bloodseeker, I like this. His Thirst now gives you bonus armor, so your third skill, your third passive, the one that makes you run faster after enemies, will increase his armor when he's chasing, and this is really awesome, because usually he'll be diving and being pretty aggressive, so this will help him stay alive. I think that's pretty cool. Blood Rage dispels the target before a blindness buff. Blood Rage dispels the target, so that means you could hypothetically cast this on allies to remove negative buffs. You could possibly remove things like Ethereal. Okay, that's kind of cool. So that means that you saw this actually in the game I just played yesterday when I played Bloodseeker against Pugna. If Pugna decreps himself and then I cast Blood Rage on him, then his Ethereal Blade will be removed, which means that I can actually kill those heroes easier. So I'm less countered basically by more things, which is the point. Bloodseeker is already in some ways countered by some things like Ethereal Blade or Force Staff's not as much, but this is pretty good as well. I think, because basically if I rupture a guy, and he pops his Ghost Scepter, I can't do damage to him, unless I cast Blood Rage, which takes a little bit extra damage, but now that could remove it, and I could just kill him. Also, rupture damage is now HP loss, which is a pretty big difference, so it goes through magic immunity, so that means if somebody BKBs, I can still rupture them for the damage, which is pretty insane, because a lot of times, this basically means that Bloodseeker can only target support heroes in the early game, and if you can only take out support heroes, then it limits your options by a lot. If the support heroes get evasive, then things get a little scary. Bounty Hunter track has been buffed. Mana cost is now lower, which means that he's more likely to track at level 1. Bounty Hunter is getting a little bit less play now. He was really powerful a bit ago, but people have learned to deal with him. Bristleback Quill Spray memory increased from 10 to 14 seconds. That means you can go up to 14 seconds between quill casts, and it'll remember that they're there. Broodmother gets a buff at Incap Bite at level 1 is 30%, so maybe we'll see this picked up earlier. Spawn Spiderling count is also increased to 4 at level 4 instead of the previous 3. So slight buffs to Broodmother here, but mostly Incap Bite is a lot better here. This is a pretty big, this is a mischance by the way, so 60% mischance on Brood is pretty severe. Centaur Warchief added Captain's Mode, so we might be seeing Centaur in the pro scene. Strafe cooldown decrease, so slight buff to him. Power Cogs, pretty big nerf to Clockwork Goblin, and they no longer knock back magic immune units. So that includes Lifestealer, actually. Clockwork Goblin slightly drafted against a Lifestealer counter, but basically if you're magic immune, if you have a BKB up, you don't have to worry about those draining you anymore, which is a pretty big hit to Clockwork, because those cogs are really good. Crystal Maiden Brilliance Aura has been upscaled, so now it's 1 at level 1. This is a huge boon to her, because she's going to have pretty much unlimited mana at level 1, because that doubles, keep in mind. Freezing Field Explosion AoE increased a little bit, and the attack speed reduction aura increased, wow, from minus 20 to minus 50. This is really big. This means that if you can actually cast this in a team fight, not only is there a better chance of it doing damage, but the attack speed reduction is really big. I don't know what the duration is for that debuff, but if it's even like 1 or 2 seconds, something like that, this is a big DPS decrease for any DPS carry. So even like an anti-mage or something like that, assuming he's not attacking Crystal Main, if she does land this debuff, it could give a lot of damage reduction to them. So Vacuum gets a slight nerf by 2 seconds. Dazzle. Shallow Grave can now be cast on magic immune allies. I like this a lot actually because before what would happen is if Dazzle ends up casting Grave on a BKB hero, it doesn't happen. Like, if your hero's in a lot of trouble and he casts BKB, you couldn't Grave him. So this makes Dazzle slightly better and can make him better in different uses. And also Shadow Wave getting a target count buff. This means that before, you could only heal 3 people at level 2, which was a little bit of a problem because it limited your offensive potential as well as your healing potential. But now it's 6 targets at level 4, so basically Dazzle's skills are getting buffed and buffed. Shadow Poison got a buff in the last patch, still not seen play. Shadow Wave now buffed even at level 4, so really good now for healing allies. Death Prophet movement speed, just kind of a weird adjustment. Her base movement speed was decreased, but her Witchcraft percentage has been increased. This means she is slower at level 1, but faster at level 7, so it will pay off at level 7. The silence AoE has also been increased to 350 at all levels. This is really good, actually. This means that her silence at level 1 is still going to be really good and probably worth picking up. So it was a little hard to land before. This is more congruent with the other AoE silence, which is Drow Rangers. Her AoE is the same at all levels, so having it at 350 base is a pretty good buff to her. Disruptor got some slight changes, but overall buff, instead of 3 strikes over 4 seconds, now does 4 strikes over 6 seconds. So that means the damage, it ends up going up, because this is 4 sources. This does, 375, now it does 400 damage at 4 sources, and it lasts for 6 seconds, which means you have more time to get glimpse, because the Thunderstrike does get vision. Keep that in mind. And the AoE is also slightly increased. Doombringer, Doom now disables Feast, Backtrack, Dispersion, Juxtapose, Bristleback, and Bloodbath. These are all basically survivability passives. Feast will give you HP, Backtrack will dodge damage, Dispersion will dodge some of the damage, Juxtapose, oh, that's Phantom Lancer's ability, I believe, to be able to, is that his ulti? I don't remember. I think Juxtapose is his 3rd skill to spawn illusions, but basically it gets rid of a bunch of passives. It did this already, but not all passives, just some passives. It's basically going to mean that killing those heroes is more likely no. And here's the Aghanim Scepter upgrade. This is really cool. The duration reworked. It doesn't count down while the target is within 550 range of Doombringer. So this means that before, the Aghanims on Doom, I believe, would increase the duration by a little bit and also increase the damage output. Overall, not really worth it because usually the hero would die before the Doom duration anyways, but now what it does is if you Doom a guy and you stand close to them, 550 range, it just keeps going. The duration doesn't decrease. This means you could hypothetically like perma Doom a guy if you just stand next to him. So in a team fight, if somebody gets Doom, this is a huge deal because he has to get away from Doom and he has to wait for that to tick down. So it means that yeah, Doom is a lot better at killing solo targets. We actually saw this at the Eastern qualifiers last night. Doom was actually drafted a lot, but we will see him maybe picked a bit more for solo killing potential. Will be good against heroes like Void and Anti-Mage still, things like that. Dragonite, small buff to him, Corrosive Breath passive from level 1 Elder Form now carries over to level 2, which is the DPS. And this is the reason that Dragonites at level 2 wouldn't pick up their second ulti. It's because the damage over time poison was generally really good. So now they'll pick it up at level 11, they can do damage to towers with it, and they'll still be good. Drow Ranger gets a very slight buff to True Shot Aura, very slight, very small percentage, 2% basically at all levels, yeah. So we won't see that affect her very much. Earthshaker's turn rate is improved. I like this a lot. The reason this is cool is because Earthshaker is almost entirely focused around Fissure, and if your turn rate is improved, that means that if you're running away from an enemy, it'll be less time for you to turn around and drop a Fissure, which is a big deal. So his hero is all about reaction time, so this is pretty cool. This sometimes matters as well when you blink in, because you'll like blink, Echo Slam, Enchant Totem, and then turn in Fissure, so he'll have a better chance of getting his combo off. The range is slightly increased, and also Echo Slam now considers illusions his hero, so it means Echo Slam is going to be a better counter towards heroes like Anti-Mage, or against PL, or against any other hero that grabs illusions. So I'm not sure what they were affecting illusions as before, but I'm guessing it was something like creeps or something. Ember's Spirit, this is a hero that isn't in Dota 2 yet. He is in Dota 1 at the moment. His guard DPS increased, so a very slight buff to this at max level. And he's added to Captain's Mode, so we will be seeing him, once he is added to Dota 2, he'll shortly be added to the Captain's Mode pool. He's kind of interesting. He's kind of similar to Storm Spirit, but fire-based, and he has some slightly different mechanics. He's kind of fun. Enchantress Aghanim Scepter bonus attack range increased by a little bit, so this means her ultimate attack range is going to be up. Malefice scaling is reworked. I understood slightly how to do this, but it was a little confusing last night. So the way Malefice worked previously is the scaling would be based on your ticks. So instead of the number of ticks being scaled, it's now the damage and the stun duration. So before, does 40 damage at level 1, it would only do 1 tick. At level 2, it would do 2 ticks of 40 damage. And at level 4, it would do 3 ticks of 65 damage. Now, it does 3 ticks at all levels. So it does 3 mini stuns no matter what, which makes it a little more interesting. It's not, it's top heavy of a nuke at low levels, but it will still do 3 ticks. So it does 0.25 seconds up to 1 second stun duration, as seen here. And the damage actually goes all the way up to 210. It also does more damage at level 1, so it makes the nuke better at level 1 and level 2, which I think is fine, because Malefice is an okay spell, but it doesn't really get really good until level 4, and it's okay at level 2. Level 3 is kind of a really shit level for it, so this may encourage people to max out Malefice more early, because the stun duration amounts, like this is a 3-second stun at level 4, as it was previously, as well as a 2-second stun at level 2. So it's like 1 second stun, 2-second stun, still a 2-second stun, and then a 3-second stun, but now it's better at level 3, and what is this, 1.5? It's actually a worse stun at level 2 now, in a way. It does less stun duration total, but 3 mini stuns is still arguably very good, and it does more damage at all levels now, so I would say it's an overall buff, but just a slight change to the abilities, and I think this is actually for the best, because it's more intuitive this way. It's less confusing how this works now, so Goblin Shredder gets a slight HP buff. This is about 60 HP. Pretty good. Int growth is going to be increased, which I think is also very good. He's going to be a little bit less reliant on maybe Bloodstone. The initial mana cost for Chakram is rescaled. This is very good. I think he does have some mana problems around 6, especially if he's not getting free farm. If he's doing an offlane role, he definitely needs less mana cost, so I think this is going to be a really decent buff for him. And the move speed for Chakram has increased by 100. So I think overall pretty good buffs for Goblin Shredder that's going to encourage him playing in the offlane, which I think is probably the best place for him. He can be played mid, but it's a little weird. Gyrocopter flat cannon cooldown increase. I like this a lot. Nice nerf to Gyrocopter. This is going to decrease his farm potential and also mean that him using this multiple times in teamfights is not going to happen. So flat cannon is arguably really good right now, so I think increasing the cooldown is definitely a good way to go about it. Instead of like nerfing the things that were previously buffed, you can just make this less useful or less often. Huskar base strength increase. This is very good. His base strength was actually lower than his base agi, so another 60 HP to him is big. The DPS for Burning Spears is increased. I hope people get this now. Like, I think it's too good to pass up. It does like 20 damage over 6 seconds. There's a massive amount of damage for 15 HP. And Life Break HP cost has increased, actually, so it costs more per level now. Berserker's Blood is reworked. This was the first... I'm sorry, this is the third passive, so... I thought for sure this was going to be his heal that was being changed. Feels each of his wounds and channels the pain, increase in attack speed and damage for each, missing 7%. Oh, that's the old one. Okay, new. Okay, first bonus starts at full health. Magic resistance. Interesting. Okay. So, this means it will no longer give damage, but it will give magic resistance and attack speed. So this means that you're probably going to want to start stacking damage items on Huskar, which you still do, actually. You won't be able to do an insane amount of damage at low levels, which means grabbing a Helm of the Dominator is probably less encouraged, in my opinion. But getting an Armlet is still going to be completely recommended. Armlet is like a plus 60 damage item for strength heroes, and he's a strength hero, so completely encouraged here. So he still gets a lot of attack speed, he's still going to get damage, and this is going to basically cover him for what his problem was before. Huskar's problem before would be, you want to get low HP on Huskar because you do more damage and attack faster, but the problem is that once you're low damage, you're very susceptible to burst. So now, if he gets low HP, he's going to have a lot of magic resistance. So let me do some math really quick, just to theory craft this. So let's say you're missing 70 HP or something like that. So for every 7% health, you get one of these buffs. So now you're going to get 7 times 10, is that correct? Magic resistance. So you're basically getting 70% magic resistance. So now his vulnerability, which was magic nukes when he was low HP, are not as existent. So if you're against a magic heavy lineup, if you get low HP, this isn't that bad. And this could actually encourage getting things like Agnum Scepters. So the only way he's going to die now is either an insane amount of magic burst or some physical damage burst at low HP. So he's going to be a lot harder to kill. I can promise you that. So maybe something like Armlet Helm the Dominator will be okay. But you could also just stack a lot of HP and maybe magic resistance. I don't know if it's worth it to grab that, but I would probably still go Armlet. I still think Spears are fantastic. Maybe I would do like Armlet Agnums, I think would be really good. You could possibly skip BKB now. Possibly. I'm not quite sure. We'll have to see how it plays out with a couple playtests, but BKB is really useful on Huskar, but if you could skip it and then have that be offset by this magic resistance, it could allow you to put your gold into important things like armlet as well as Aghanims, and then you can end up being a damage monster without needing the magic resistance. The downside to this is that if you don't have a BKB, even if you don't die from it, you're going to be stunned the whole time and you won't be able to do damage. So this might not work out, but hopefully this can open them up. I like this buff a lot, and I think it could actually put Huskar into competitive play. Maybe. At the very least, he's going to be a lot better against his previous complete counter, which is magic nuke. So I like this a lot. It's pretty cool. And keep in mind, I would probably change my skill build on this as well. I'll probably start maxing Spears first and then Berserker's Blood second. Completely serious. Because if you just throw like 4 Spears after you use an ulti, you could actually do like 300 magic damage or something like that. A little bit more. Invoker buffs as well. Mana cost decrease for Alacrity, so encouraging Alacrity use. Ghost Walk slow has increased slightly, very slight buff here. Ghost Walk cooldown decrease from 60 to 35, and Tornado damage is rescaled to a decent buff. Let me think about the math here. So this is Wex plus Quas, which is still there, but it's now multiplied by 2, which is multiplied by 15, which is essentially like this number being 40, if I'm not crazy. If you pull this out of here. Oh, this is 2 times Wex, excuse me. Okay, it's not 2 times all of this in here. Thank God for algebra, man. This is 2 times the Wex. So basically this means that tornado damage is mostly based on your Wex levels. So Wex is now twice as good as it was before. So basically if you go Quas Wex and you mostly max Wex, which is the typical Quas Wex build, you will do much more damage with Tornado. Which makes a lot of sense. This means that Tornado basically does a higher damage nuke. So let's say, for example, I have 6 levels of Wex. I hope it's okay that you guys like me doing this with like small deviations on breakdowns and stuff. But I mean, there's so much to talk about that I figured you guys would like to watch this. So let's say, for example, you're at a typical Quas Wex level. Let's say you have like 6 Wex and then 3 Quas and 1 level of Exhort. So 6 times 2 here gives you 12, and then we're going to add this to the Quas, which is 3. So now we have 15, and then we're going to multiply this by 15, which gives you 225 plus 70. Oops, plus 70. So now we're doing about 100 or about 300 damage at a decent Tornado level. This is a pretty okay nuke. If we compare this to what it was previously, that was 6 Quas plus 3 Wex. I'm sorry, 6 Wex plus 3 Quas is 9. 9 times 20. And we're going to add that to 70. So it's like a very slight buff to Tornado. If we do lower levels, I assume it's going to be better in the previous method, but I might be wrong. Let's say we're at like 3-3 or something, or even like 2-3. Let's say 2 Wex, 2 Quas, or 3 Quas. So that'll be 5 times 20 plus 70 equals plus 70. So 170 damage at a level 5 points into Wex Quas. And that would be, well, it's basically 4 plus 3, so 7 times 15. Plus 70. So it's about the same damage at low levels, but it ends up doing more damage at higher levels, basically. Once your Wex gets maxed out, the Tornado does a bit more damage. So I don't think this is going to make a Invoker viable. Honestly, he needs a base damage buff for him to be laneable. At least in the top tier levels, he's very, very hard to lane right now just because everybody's going to have so much more base damage over you. You almost have to rush phase boots on him. I think if he got some base damage buffs, he would be playable again on the mid lane, but I'm not really sure if it'll be, especially with the Bottle Crow nerf right now. I think that'll be later, but he might be more laneable because of the Bottle Crow nerf. But we'll see. I'd be surprised. I don't think these are quite enough buffs, and they're in really weird areas, like a weird Ghost Walk buff. This is kind of peculiar. It's going to make him more survivable mid, but I don't think this is enough to make him played. Alright, Wisp nerf. Spirits no longer provide vision, except temporarily when they collide with an enemy hero, so it's harder to scout for enemies with this unless you catch them, so there is a chance of dodging this or Wisp giving less vision, and Overcharge HPMP cost is increased slightly by 1%, so very slight nerfs to Wisp. This isn't that bad because Overcharge is used, but not like a massive amount. Spirits not giving vision isn't a huge nerf, but he will still be getting tri lanes because they're going to have ward vision anyways, usually. Omni Slash no longer jumps on Tombstone zombies. That's good. A good Juggernaut buff. I wouldn't even say this is that big of a buff. It's just like a needed fix, basically. Like, Juggernaut's still played a lot right now, and this isn't really going to affect his play. Nobody picks Undying to counter him, so I think this is completely fair. Keeper Light base strength decreased by 2. So, moderate nerf to Keeper Light. This is a nerf of 38 HP, which is usually about 1 auto attack. So, the hero's already pretty squishy. He's going to be even more squishy now, and this is probably a good way to nerf him without, like, affecting. Like, this is one of the cool things that I like about the way Ice Frog buffs and nerfs. If he says that a hero is overpowered, he doesn't necessarily want to say, oh, I want to make Illuminate better or worse every time. It's not like Keeper Light's too overpowered. Let's slightly decrease his Illuminate damage. Let's slightly increase his Illuminate mana cost. It's like the nerfs come in other areas that won't necessarily ruin the fun of the hero. Like if you always continue to nerf things like Illuminate, 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 it takes the fun away from the hero. If he just says 2 strength decrease, it means you have to play a little safer, and there's a chance that you can make it up with your items, for example. Like if you nerfed his Illuminate, that would hurt him late game. And he already sucks late game, basically. Or at least, he doesn't suck late game. He's a pretty good scaling support late game, but relatively all support heroes are going to suck late game compared to early game. So decreasing his strength by 2 mostly impacts him, I would say, in the early game by far, and still makes him okay late. So it's like a little adjustment you can do in design. It's really smart. Ghost ship damage increase. The Kunkka buffs here are a little scary to me. This happens sometimes when a hero starts getting played heavily right before a patch. Like a month ago, I would have been like, okay, this makes sense. Nobody plays Kunkka. But as of a couple weeks ago, he's starting to get picked a crapload in the Chinese scene. By Team DK, Super's been playing him a lot. LGD China has been playing Kunkka. Pretty much every team has been playing Kunkka now. Even Rattlesnake played him a couple times last night. So he's getting Ghost Ship damage increase. X marks the spot. Mana cost is decrease. I like this a lot, actually, because he is already a little mana starved. So putting this at 80 at all levels is going to encourage people to max out X. And it vision from 1000 flying to 400 ground vision. So it gives less vision in team fights, which apparently I didn't know it gave that much vision. But that was really good. 400 ground vision is a fair way to do it, though. Legion Commander, another hero that isn't in Dota 2 yet, the dual bonus damage per victory increase. This he has an ulti that's really cool. It like does this duel where you force somebody to attack you for 5 seconds, kind of like Axe Ultimate. But if somebody dies in the 3, 4, 5 second cooldown, or while it's going on, they lose damage and Legion Commander gets the damage. It's pretty cool. So that means that he's going to get more damage per level of duel picked up. And he's also added to Captain's Mode, so we might be seeing him picked up. He's kind of like Batrider in a way that you can initiate and then use the duel. He also has like a buff that you can cast on allies that gives him armor and regeneration. He has like an AoE that you cast that does damage that gives him attack damage and movement speed, I think. And then what is his other skill? Oh yeah, it's kind of like Counter Helix for Axe, except it's single target. So if somebody attacks him, he has a chance to reflect damage back. It's kind of cool. It's like Return and Counter Helix. Return on Centaur. It's kind of like that. Kind of like both of them put together. Lich gets a big buff. His Chain Frost bounce count increased from 7 to 10. That means how many times it bounces between units. So this is going to own noobs even harder. I'm going to call it right now. The win percentages of Lich at low levels is going to go through the roof. He's going to be like the best low level hero now. I think he's still going to be okay in high levels. I think this is a pretty good buff to him because his other skills are good, but Chain Frost is a little weak. But if you can combo this with like an RP or something, we're talking like an extra. This is like an extra 900 magic damage that it can do. Lifestealer gets a big nerf for open wounds cast range. This is going to hurt him heavily in the early game. This means that almost always, I would say, we're going to probably start seeing Lifestealer grab more levels of open wounds. We're starting to see that, but basically he's much worse in tri-lanes now. Because before he could actually initiate quite easily at 600 range, but now he has to get quite close. So this is more going to be like a follow-up disable rather than the initial now, which is going to cost him a lot. So I think this is a cool nerf and a much-needed nerf. Lifestealer is one of the best heroes in the pro scene right now, and if not the best, and that's going to hurt his tri-lane abilities. Lena's attack range buffed by 10, slightly better in a tri-lane, or, yeah, basically a little bit better harassing. Her attack range is actually huge. Lion's mana, drain, break, and cast range improved. The cast range is, I assume, the first number, and the break is the second number. This is pretty cool. This is going to make it better for laning, even if you're playing like a support or a mid-roll, because you can drain mana from your opponents. I think that's pretty cool. Aghanim's Finger of Death cooldown decreased down to 20 seconds. You can use this twice in a team fight. Might see more Lion plays. As a support, he's never going to make an Aghanim Scepter. As a mid, he might make an Aghanim Scepter if you do well. I'm having trouble playing him well personally, but I know some people can. He's a little squishy, and he requires a really solid play and safe play to do well with him. But if you can get an Aghanims, he's great with Blink Dagger. So Lone Druid gets some big nerfs. Armlet's no longer going to work the same way it does, so you will get HP drained. It's probably a needed nerf to him. He's going to have to go back to older builds like Maelstrom and Radiance. And the Spirit Bear bounty is increased to 300, which means that if he dies in the early game, which will happen, it's going to be 300 gold, and you cannot let that go to a support, because 300 gold in the early game is huge. So that means Lone Druid's going to have to be a little bit more careful. Maybe we'll see him less in the offlane, because you will expect to see the bear die in the offlane, and you will most definitely be spending resummons rather than letting him die. Like before, letting him die was like, whatever, they got 100 gold, I made a small mistake, but now it's like, that's a big mistake. 300 gold to your opponents is huge, so small Lone Druid nerfs. I think the armlet change is going to affect him more than the bounty increase one, but he'll have to go back to old builds that are a little bit less effective, which I think is going to be fair. Abaddon, I love this hero. Buff by 10. He is being worked on in Dota 2, so hopefully he gets ported soon. Armor increase on Lycanthrope. Magnetar reverse polarity damage has been decreased pretty heavily at level 1, by the way, so comboing somebody is going to be slightly harder, but the disable's still there. Medusa's Stone Gaze is reworked. How does this work now? They'll have their attack movement and turn rate reduced by 50% until the end of the spell. If you accumulate 2 seconds time in total, you'll turn to stone. That's really cool. Stone units are disabled, have 100% magic resistance, and take extra damage from physical attacks. That's really cute. That's so cool. Stone units are disabled, which is like a stun, have 100% magic resistance, and they take extra damage from physical attacks. I really like this. This means that if you can stone people, that your split shot and your basic damage is going to do more. Your snake will do less, actually. So you're probably going to want to snake at the beginning of the fight, and then cast Stone Gaze. But it's really cool. View angle spread is 85, slightly higher. The gaze duration is now 6 seconds instead of 5. The stone duration is 3 seconds. So that's like a 3-second stun if it lands. And the bonus physical damage is 50%. So that's pretty cool. The downside is that if you combo this with like Intcaster teams, it might hurt you a bit. But if you could do like, even if you do like a Ravage to set this up, this could be like an easy teamfight win. So this means Medusa is going to be much better in teamfights. I actually liked her ulti before, but this one's even better now. AoE is larger, the cooldown is 90 at all levels, and it's always going to cost mana now, which I think is fair. Kills illusions instead of petrifying them. So this means that it's not going to do bonus illusion damage upon the immediate cast, but if the illusions, for example, right-click and they stare for 2 seconds, they'll just die. So it still will be useful against illusions, which is pretty cool. So I like this change. I think it's going to give Medusa a black hole-like ability if your opponents are bad. I'm trying to think of combos you could use with this, like X or something, like X Medusa. No, that wouldn't be worth it, but it does make it so your opponents have to be really careful about fighting. And keep in mind, turn rate is reduced, which means that it's not going to be the easiest thing ever to just turn around. And this is 2 seconds in total for the 6-second duration. So for 6 seconds, you cannot look at her that much. So I could see people making mistakes with this, especially with the turn rate nerf, or the turn rate decrease with that ulti. So I really like this. This is cool. Removed from Captain's mode. Okay, so Medusa is taken out of Captain's mode because her ulti has been changed so much. And this is usually what happens when you take a hero that's been in the game for a while, and you rework something that could be game-breaking, because what they're basically preventing, it would be fun to see her being played with it, but the downside, this makes me sad because I wish she was played in the first place, but it basically makes sure that there isn't like a 2-month or 3-month period where Medusa is overpowered and picked and banned immediately, because they don't want to like really dice up the metagame heavily all of a sudden based on a buffer nerf, because that would make things not fun to watch or play in the competitive scene. Meepo gets a big buff. Innate magic resistance is increased by 10%, so his base magic resistance on Meepo is now higher, which is pretty cool, because his previous counter, like his win ratios aren't that good in pubs, but this means that AoE nuke teams are going to be less able to kill him, so it basically protects him slightly against counter picks, which I think is pretty cool. Mirana's arrow now deals up to 100 extra damage based on distance to arrow travel. That's pretty cool. So longer arrows will do more damage. Moonlight Shadow cooldown has been decreased again. Nice buff. And Starfall will choose a new target for the second star if the first died before impact. That's really cool. What would basically happen sometimes is you would kill the guy or the unit that would be next to you. Like the first Starfall would kill him, and he would be the second Starfall target, and then the second would hit his dead body, which is a waste. So this means that Starfall is more likely to jungle better and kill heroes better, basically. That way it won't catch like a creep. Like if you have a bunch of creeps around that are at 300 HP, for example, and you use Starfall and you're also standing next to a hero, the second target will be less likely to go to the low HP target. So pretty cool. Morphling base attack time will be increased, so he does more DPS now with a right click. Naga Siren Riptide has been anti-nerfed. It's been put back to where it was before, 10 seconds at all levels, so slight Naga Siren buffs. Necrolite buffs are really cool. If a unit dies on a Reaper's side, it will be credited to Necrolite. I don't know if this counts as a Necrolite kill, or if it just means that Sadist procs, but at the very least Sadist will proc, which is huge, because when Sadist is level 4, if you get a kill, you get 600 mana out of it, which pretty much resets the mana you spend on Reaper's Scythe, which happens sometimes. Like, you'll cast Reaper's Scythe, you'll burn all your mana, and then you won't get it back. And this means that you're going to be more likely to not have to buy Arcane Boots. I still think Phase is going to be the right choice on Necrolite. As long as you cast your ulti, you get your mana back, and you get some HP out of it, and you should be able to stay alive. And an Aghanim Scepter change, when you ulti somebody and you kill them with it, buyback is disabled, which is huge. I don't think this is going to encourage Necrolite to be played enough. I still think he's too easily countered by mana drain heroes that are common in the meta, like Anti-Mage or Nubian Assassin especially. But But it's kind of it's a cool thing. If you use, it's going to encourage you using this on the enemy's carry because you could play a 5v4. So I think it's a cool change, but I don't think it's going to be enough for Necrolite to be played. Nubian Assassin taking nerfs. I love this. Mana burn, drain, and damage decrease. It's now scaling 3.5 at level 1 up to 5 times. So it's going to basically mean that Nubian Assassin is harder to kill people with now because mana burn is doing 1.5 less the int. So a slight nerf to him. This is also very good because you can't just come to lane and drain all of your mana with level 1, which is very good. Somewhere that I think he definitely needed to be nerfed. His mana cost is also rescaled, so it's easier to cast at level 1, but it does less damage. I think this is completely balanced and needed to happen, actually. Night Stalker, 190 attack speed rescaled, so it does slightly more attack speed at level 1. So this means that it's okay for you to grab I guess the movement speed still scales up, but if you want to grab a Silence and still be pretty good at level 6 or level 7 at nighttime, you'll be better. Your attack speed will still be a bit higher. So it's basically better at lower levels. OD's movement speed slightly increased by 5. This means that grabbing something like drums might be more encouraged because this is the number that all of your movement speed adjusting abilities and items are based on. So for example, a hero that is 280 movement speed gets less out of a drum than an OD does. So if we do some math really quick just to make this point, if I have 280 movement speed and I multiply that by 5%, I am getting 14 movement speed out of it. So you'll end up being like 294. If you're 315, and you get multiplied by 0.5, then you get 15.75. What was the difference? Was it 14? So you get an extra like 1.75. This might not seem by a lot, but when you get things like phase boots and drum and maybe some other movement speed buffs, it really does add up a lot. So slight buff to OD to keep him survivable and better at chasing. Ignite DPS has increased at level 4, so that's better at level 4. Aghanim Scepter for Omni Knight now gives him global, so his ulti would make all of his allies immune basically to physical damage unless there's a diffusal blade, and also affects buildings, including regen. This is pretty big because it actually gives a lot of regen per second. I think it's something like 30 or 50, something like that. 50 regen per second, or 30 regen per second is going to affect buildings. You could save buildings with this, which is pretty cool. I could see this being picked up on him because I think the stats are great for the hero. If he becomes more tanky himself, it's better for him to save allies. I would actually like to start building this on the hero. I think could be good. You could go like Arcane, Mech, and Bottle maybe into Aghanims. I could see that being quite useful. I would like to see that on him. I think this is a nice addition to Omni Knight. Panda's Aghanim's Primal Split. Units now gain your current level of Drunken Brawler, which is the passive evasion as well as crit. And also the Fire Panda will no longer upgrade damage with Aghanim Scepter. The reason that this is being changed, it's roughly the same damage as Drunken Brawler. That's because the Fire Panda already did a lot of damage. If he was critting on top of that, he would be critting for like, I think like 500, something like that, which is probably a little too high. He was apparently getting a damage buff with the Aghanims, so now what happens is, this basically means that the Stone Panda as well as the Cyclone Panda are going to be much more higher damage individually. The Fire Panda will do roughly the same, but most importantly, the Fire Panda is going to have evasion now, and that one's actually pretty easy to kill. So he's going to have more survivability when you hit Aghanims. So it's a pretty cool buff to Brewmaster that's going to make him better in the late game actually. Phantom Assassin's slight buff for evasion at level 4, which is going to encourage people to pick it up earlier. Right now, people don't grab this, they don't max that out very early. They usually get stats. Spirit Lance, Doppelwalk, Juxtapose, and Phantom Edge Illusion's damage dealt decreased from 25 to 20. So a pretty big nerf to Phantom Lancer. This is a 25% decrease? No, a 20% decrease in damage for his illusions, which is massive. They're still going to do full feedback damage, so Diffusal Blade level 2 will still do good damage, but this is a pretty big nerf to him, honestly. It means that his overall illusion army is going to do reduced damage, so pretty cool. I like this. His Mantle Illusions will still do like 32% damage or something, but his overall illusion army is going to be less of a problem. So I think this is an appropriate Phantom Lancer buff. He's not that overpowered right now. I know a lot of you guys think he's the worst hero ever, but he's really not if you're at a decent skill level in the game. And he's not picked all the time right now. So Phoenix. Cost per second increased from 3 to 4. I haven't played Phoenix since he got reworked like twice, so I don't know what he's up to. Flesh Heap strength bonus increased to 2.5 at level 4. That's pretty huge. So Pudge is going to be better in the late game now. Pugna Nether Blast structure damage increased from 33 to 50%, so big buffs to Pugna, and he can now decrep the target Tombstone. Okay, so you can now decrep a Tombstone. Kind of interesting. Could be useful. You could do a Pugna Tombstone lineup because in the late game, Tombstone is pretty easy to burst down. But if you can put a decrep on it and keep that alive for a couple seconds after they try to focus it, that could be pretty huge. But most importantly, Pugna is going to be an even better tower pusher as a mid hero. He's actually okay. I think he's an okay hero right now. His burst damage is really high actually, but the downside is he's pretty squishy, and He's okay. He's really good at farming, honestly. Razor Eye of the Storm duration increased to 30 seconds at all levels. The strike interval decrease. This is a buff to his ulti at all levels. It will attack faster. And Aghanim's goes really, really low, actually, down to 0.35 seconds. Unstable current movement speed bonus increased as well. So all around, pretty good buffs to Razor. He might be decently playable now. He's going to be really fast with 4 levels of this. I keep wanting to upgrade this first, honestly, to make him super fast. Pretty soon. I should probably start getting drums on him, like phase drum. Go phase drum on him. I don't know what his base movement speed is, but you can probably make him insanely fast. Maybe I kind of want to like not max out plasma field, and I want to go for like a static link unstable current build personally, but maybe I'll try that some other day. Rikimaru fade time is decreased at max level, so he's better at level 16 if they don't have detection. I don't think this is really that bad because he's still the same at level 6, which I think is balanced because he's really good at that because it's harder to afford detection. But late game, if you can break gems or sentries or dusts or things like that, I think this is pretty balanced because he kind of gets crappy late game. His ulti's not very good. Invisibility fade delay when exiting Sandstorm is improved. So 1.5 seconds at all levels. This is pretty cool. This means that you can get 1 level of Sandstorm and still use it to juke, which means it's going to be, you don't have to max it out now. And it has a smoother damage interval at 0.5, so that's pretty cool. So that means that like the damage that it does, like normally it ticks every 1 second. Now it ticks every half second and does half the damage. So this is good. It's going to make the ability look a little better. Shadow Demon base intelligence decreased by 3, so slightly less mana at level 1, a necessary nerf because he actually has pretty much unlimited mana early game. This is going to be a total of 39 mana decrease, and it no longer gives vision over the targets with the debuff. So previously, as you cast it, if you catch somebody with it, it would give vision of them. So this is a pretty big nerf, but it's kind of overpowered, I guess, to have it there in the first place. You can still scout with Shadow Poison, it just... it still reveals the projectile path, but no longer locks on vision to units with the debuff on them for 10 seconds. It was pretty good, and I think this is a fine nerf. It's not going to hurt him that bad. The base intelligence is going to hurt more than this, I think, but some necessary slight nerfs to Shadow Demon. Requiem of Souls now, the slow is now rescaled to 20% at all levels, and the damage reduction increased from scaling to 50% at all levels. So just casting this in a team fight is going to be really good for Shadow Demon, or Shadow Fiend, and going to keep him more survivable against diving heroes that can just jump on him and not escape. So if you can just cast this on a hero like PA or Anti-Mage or whoever is fighting him in melee range, it's going to be a really, really big addition to the team fight. And this AoE is so big that there's a good chance this will last on the enemy teams. I don't know what the duration is at. I'd have to look that up, but even still, pretty nice change. Aghanim's Mass Serpent Ward's damage increased. Okay, this is a scaling. Wow, this is a really big buff to Aghanim's Mass Serpent Wards, especially at level 1. The change of difference is pretty huge. It's like 30 damage at all levels, it looks like. This is like a really big buff. Basic version damage numbers also normalized a bit. So instead of it scaling, looks like it's an overall buff to Shadow Shaman Serpent Wards. So a small buff to Shadow Shaman ulti. I think this is good because his wards don't really scale very well late game. So Global Silence now affects sleeping units, which I assume is for heroes like Naga. I assume that's what that means. Aghanim's Scepter for Silencer as well as possible. So it applies the current level of Curse of the Silent to all units and increases ultimate duration by 1. Does this apply to creeps? I guess this applies to creeps as well and increases ultimate duration by 1. So basically it encourages Silencer maxing out his Curse of the Silent if you want to get Aghanim's. Would I get Aghanim's on this hero? Probably not. As a support Silencer, I would, probably, because that's pretty effective. Curse of the Silent's okay at level 4. Does like 30 damage per second, so it would apply some nice damage. Skeleton King Reincarnation Slow now affects attack speed as well. It also happens immediately upon death rather than after reincarnating. I like this a lot because before, like, Skeleton King would die, and then the enemies would have 3 seconds to run away, and then Set the Slow went to play. So now it's going to slow them and keep them close to him. It means his ulti is going to be a bit better. Critical Strike's also reworked. Previously had a passive, it would be a passive crit, pretty much like this, 15% to crit for a certain amount. It has an active component that you can use as well. Passively gains you a chance to land a critical strike, which is the same, and it can now be cast to temporarily steal HP from a targeted enemy hero. When the active is used, the critical strike is temporarily disabled for the drain duration. So what this basically means is while you're chasing somebody, you can use the HP drain. It does 20% of max non-lethal, which means you can't kill with it. It'll drain for 7 seconds, the cast range is 550, the mana cost is 30, and the cooldown is 25. It does not affect max HP, just temporarily drains, then returns it. How does this work? what does it say returns it? That confuses me. 20% of max drain upon opponents. Temporarily steal HP from a target enemy hero. So apparently, after the 7 seconds, it will return it. But I feel like this isn't... I guess this makes him better in the early game, is the point. If this returns the HP after the drain ends, this means that all the drain that you accomplished in that 7 seconds is returned. But hypothetically, in the early game, the passive crit is not going to pay off. Like, 15% to do this much damage is pretty shit. But hypothetically, if you max out your skull, what is it called? Hellfire Blast, and you get 1 level of Mortal Strike, which is the same at all levels for this effect. This means that if you stun somebody early game, you can basically cast the Drain, and you can cast the stun. You can do 20% of their damage, of their HP, over 7 seconds, which isn't a ton early game for like a low level HP hero. That's like 120, 150 damage, something like that. But those together should lower their HP enough with bursts from allied heroes that you should be able to kill them. Late game, you're not going to want to cast this, except for on maybe really tanky heroes that you're running away from. Like, if you're running away, you're going to want to cast this because it should temporarily steal HP from a target enemy hero. This is kind of confusing. I really think it does go back. So it kind of temporarily drains, then returns it. I might be a little confused how this works, but regardless, it's going to be good in the early game to combo with Hellfire Blast to try to kill heroes. And in the late game, you could either use it to reduce the HP of tanky heroes for a period of time, or try to stay alive. By the way, I didn't make a really big focus of this, but the critical strike is temporarily disabled when you're draining. So that means when you want to crit, you don't want to be draining. This is why I'm kind of like dancing around the issue. If that wasn't in there, you would use it all the time. Like, yeah, sure, use it against tanky heroes, it's great. But since the mana cost is there and the cooldown is 25, like, you only want to use it when you're not attacking, basically, when you're not trying to do a lot of damage. So if you're running away, you would cast it on somebody and walk away, trying to stay alive, because that will reduce the total damage you take. Anyways, that's enough about Skeleton King. Slaughter bash damage, type from magical to physical. This means that now you'll do more damage when you bash heroes. It was magical before, which basically means that all the minus armor that you get from your ulti doesn't make your bash do more. So he should be able to do more towards bursted targets. Sprint cooldowns also decrease from 40 to 28, so pretty decent buffs to Slaughter. Still don't necessarily think he'll see play, but we'll see. Shrapnel AoE is increased slightly. Spirit Breaker Charge of Darkness will now cast Greater Bash on its target. So basically what would happen before is you would Charge of Darkness, everybody you would charge through would get Greater Bashed, but the guy you actually hit directly would only get stunned, and it would do like no bonus damage, which looked really weird for me. So I think this is a really nice buff. Basically now his charge applies a Greater Bash, and his ulti also applies a Greater Bash. So it's like you have 2 Greater Bashes. His ulti, though, does extra damage on the Greater Bash, so it's definitely worth it to max out Greater Bash first on Spirit Breaker no matter what. I can't imagine a situation where it wouldn't be worth it. Like, maybe you could put equal levels, but I think a 1-1-4 skill build is the right build for Spirit Breaker and at level 7, and then max out Charge afterwards, and then the aura. The Greater Bash goes through BKB since Greater Bash goes through BKB. So this should make Spirit Breaker much better in the early game because you have more reliable damage, which I think is good because his unreliability, they took his reliability away by taking the damage out of his passive and they put it into his bash. So now he has more reliability, which I think is necessary. Storm Spirit Electric Vortex cooldown decreased, so slight buff to Storm Spirit. 18 seconds at level 4, so this does encourage leveling it up a little bit earlier. Tauren Chieftain, Ancestral Spirit Vision type from flying to ground. That's his spirit thing. That means that you can't see up hills with it anymore. And the aura has been buffed, so even higher at level 4. So this means it completely removes your magic resistance as well as your base armor. So this is really, really good against agi carries. Really good against agi carries. Conjure Image Illusion duration increased, and the Sunder minimum HP exchange decreased. So it means you can put people all the way. Minimum HP exchange decrease. So that means you can put people down to 15% HP when you Sunder, I believe. Ravage AoE rescaled to 1025 at all levels is pretty cool. It means better. This is actually a Tide buff, by the way. Tide has been getting nerf after nerf, but now his Ravage is a big AoE at level 1, or level 6 that is. Tiny toss cooldown decrease, so more tosses in a team fight. You can also toss units to runes, which is kind of cool. You could possibly run with a support and then toss the support onto the rune, basically. Treant Leech Seed slows increase slightly, and the healing effect no longer ends when the target dies. I think these are necessary buffs, especially the second one, because sometimes you would cast on the creep and the creep would die, and then you're like, I wanted to heal from that, it sucked. Battle Trance cooldown increase, so big nerf to Troll ulti increased to 30 seconds, and the duration decreased from 10 to 7, which I think was necessary nerfs to Troll Warlord. Tuskar Snowball and cooldown decreased from 24 to 21. Slight buff to Tuskar. Soul Rip cast range increased slightly. That's fine. Ursa's swipes. Duration increased from 6 to 15, so this means that you can attack somebody, and then 15 seconds later you can hit him again and you'll still have it. This will make it slightly easier for him to rush as well. There's basically no chance of you being permabashed and getting your Fury Swipes lost. Like, hypothetically, if Rosh bashed you like 3 times in a row, you could lose the Fury Swipe stack, so that was a little scary before, but now it's not going to be a problem. Vengeful Spirit gets a strength increase, 2 strength buff at level 1, which means she goes up to an extra 38 HP. Pretty good. That's going to put her around 500 HP, and she gains an extra 0.3 per level. So Venge all around going to be tankier. And her Nether Swap has been buffed, scaling at level 1 and level 2, but mostly just better at level 1, which is a nice buff. It's just going to be a lot easier to gank with now. Venomancer gets a Poison Sting buff, much better at level 4, so that's a pretty insane duration. Viper Corrosive Skin affects any damage source, so if anybody does damage to Viper, they will take Corrosive Skin. And this is pretty big because Corrosive Skin slow is, I believe, 30% attack and movement speed at level 4. So if anybody does damage to this guy, it's going to hurt them heavily. Before it was only right clicks, so if a support just like threw their nukes on and ran away, it was fine. But this is a big deal. We might see Viper more as like a tanky, slow, everybody hero. And also Viper Strike, which is his ulti, is no longer removed by Dark Pact or Kraken Shell, which I think is actually great. Especially the Dark Pact one. Like, Slark just counters Viper way too hard. Because, like, you basically have no damage source. You have to right-click the guy. Like, you can use, like, sure, he's not going to remove all of your poison damage because you're going to be recasting that constantly. But you can't ulti him. As soon as you ulti him, he casts Dark Pact, and he just removes your ulti. It was, like, the nastiest counter ever. So I think Slark definitely hard countered a couple heroes way too hard, and Viper was one of them. So I like this change. Winter and Wyvern, Dota 1 hero, I haven't played him yet. He was recently added like 6 months or a year ago. Haven't played him yet. Witch Doctor, Death Ward cast range rescaled to 400 all level like this. Makes him a little safer. And his Maledict cast range is also increased. So Maledict should be a little safer to pick up early now. You can possibly grab it over stats. Items. So on items, slight nerf to Django, higher recipe cost. Armlet HP regen is decreased because Armlet's been used so much lately. Especially on like Lifestealer, basically. This is a slight nerf to Lifestealer or Armlet carrying heroes. Assault Cuirass now armor or a positive armor stacks with Vlad's, which is a big deal. Because before, Vlad's plus 5 armor would not stack with Assault Cuirass. So we'll probably see people picking up Assault and Vlad's more often. Or at least people putting more preference on Vlad's. It's kind of a Vlad's buff more than an AC buff, I would say. Because people are more encouraged to get Vlad's because the late game heroes will still get AC. BKB, slight nerf to this. It has a 6th level of decrease. That means at max level, Black King Bar can now be at 4-second duration, which is more like a really weak rage than anything else. It'll go down to 50-second cooldown. So this is basically a nerf towards Black King Bar in the long-term team fight. It's going to force people to rebuy them more often. So Blade Mail armor increased to 6. Damage return cooldown decreased from 22 to 17. Pretty good Blade Mail buff. I think this item's honestly good situationally on some heroes. So Bloodstone initial charges increased from 6 to 8. You can also instantly activate it to kill yourself. This might be confusing to you guys. Why would you ever want to kill yourself with Bloodstone? But there's a mechanic in Bloodstone that's very rarely touched upon. If you die with Bloodstone, you actually do an AoE heal and mana to your allies. It also gives vision, and if enemies or creeps die there, you still get EXP for them as if you're still in the battle. So it will cause to trigger the AoE heal that will always happen when you die. Bloodstone, 300-second cooldown, targets the ground to be used to help prevent accidental usage. So you'd basically use this if you know you're going to die and you want to heal your allies. Or hypothetically, if you want to get full HP, you can kill yourself with it, which is kind of weird, but keep in mind when you have a lot of charges on Bloodstone that you respawn fast anyways. So if you wanted to try to save a carry or something, or some other hero that's really important, or if everybody's really low and you're going to die anyways, you think, you could just kill yourself with Bloodstone, heal everybody, you'll respawn shortly anyways, you could buy back and TP into the fight, something like that. It just gives you another option. And yeah, you have to click it and then click on the ground to use it. So there's not that many heroes that build Bloodstone, but it gives you an option if you want to. I can't wait to see fails of this. I know there's going to be fails on this really soon. Somebody's going to like accidentally kill themselves with Bloodstone constantly.
You have to click it on the ground.
Yeah, I know. I know it's like, it's not super easy to accidentally use it, but it's going to happen. You know somebody's going to do it, so. While empty bottle causes couriers to move 30% slower, so this is a bottle crow nerf. This is going to change the game a moderate amount. especially for how pro games are played, really commonly right now, mid heroes will just go to the mid lane and they'll break even. Like a hero like Magnus can even break even against a hero like Queen of Pain just because you spam Shockwave and get last hits, and then you have the courier fly back and forth. So it's going to be better for high skilled players to be able to get kills in the middle lane, because if you own somebody in the middle lane, they can't just rely on the bottle to keep fairing them regen. So this is a big buff towards strong mid players like Dendi or S4, for example, because worse mid players are going to have a harder time winning that lane because the bottle causes the couriers to move quite a bit slower. So in combination with this, the courier no longer block neutral. That's not important. But their speed burst is now 50% movement speed bonus. This basically means that previously there was no reason to make the courier slower, but it's basically adjusting the speed burst to what it should be. So now when you use the movement speed burst, it's still going to reach max speed, but if it has a bottle, it won't actually reach max speed. So empty bottles on couriers make them fly really slow. So you basically are going to have to pick stronger mids, and you're going to have better players on mid who will affect the game. So it's harder for mids to just break even. The mid role is going to be more important, unlike it was in the past, which is going to make Dota a lot more fun to watch, I think. Dagon recipe cost decrease, so slight buff to Dagon. This means Dagon 5 is now 250 gold less. Big buff. Dust of Appearance stacks in inventory now. It also slows heroes with an invisibility buff on them by 10%, which means if you're a hero like Bounty Hunter and you want extra movement speed, you should actually cast a spell or something. Ethereal Blade can all be self-cast. Well, it can already be self-cast on an ally, but the duration is now increased to 4 seconds. That means that if you want to keep a hero ethereal, this must be like a huge duration. I think it was already a couple seconds, like 3 seconds or something. So I bet you could cast this on a support hero. Like pick this item up on a carry, and you probably wouldn't cast it on a support. But if somebody got Chronosphered, you could cast it on a support hero and just keep them ethereal for super long. It's pretty cool. Yule's Scepter movement speed bonus is increased by 5. This is so much. It's like a boots. Force Staff recipe cost decrease, slight buff to Force Staff. I think this is good. I think it was a little too expensive, but I don't think Force Staff is really OP right now. It's good, but I think this recipe cost decrease is a good thing. Gemma's True Sight can no longer be destroyed, and the gold is being increased by 150. I think this is a good buff because it's an interesting change. First of all, this means that buying a gem is more risky. It's more likely to go to your opponents. If somebody loses it in a team fight, it's going to be more of a scramble because whoever has the invis team and kills it or sees the gem on the ground will oftentimes just kill it. But now it means that they have to drop an item and they have to grab it, because if they don't grab it, their opponents are going to grab it, and it's certainly not going to be left on the ground there. So this basically means that gem is more likely to go to the enemy team. It's less easier to be dealt with by a team that is behind. I think that's the most important thing. Like a team that's ahead could just kill it and prevent the gem from going over, but it's more of a gamble now. It's like slightly more pushed into the rapier range of dangerousness. Like you can't just kill it on the ground. You can't just get rid of the problem and win the game. It's now going to go to the enemy team, and they're going to be able to take map control back from you because of it. Hedra's AoE is increased slightly. Blink Dagger slight buff, 12-second cooldown. Lincoln Sphere slight buff, 17-second cooldown. Lothar's slight nerf. The damage decrease is 22 now. Lothar's was too good. This is Shadowblade, by the way. Slightly too good, I think, than it was. So 8 less damage. I think this is fair. Medallion cast range is increased to 1,000. It's okay. Mechanism Aura AoE increased to 750, and the Buckler is also getting AoE. They're just making this all consistent. That's fine. Armor types, they'll take a bit less damage from creeps, but same damage versus heroes. So Necro creeps, the summons will be better versus creeps now. Null Talisman slightly cheaper by 135. Hey man, dude, Dagon is now what? 260 gold less at level 5. Such a sick buff. Observer Ward initial stock now starts at 1 instead of 2. This is a pretty big deal. What this basically means is that it's going to be easier to gank in the early game. It's trying to make the game more fun to watch because there will be more kills that happen. So very slight buff to that. They'll still be able to get a rune ward up, but hypothetically, if you actually counter both of those wards, you're screwed for 6 minutes. And this is also going to make it really hard to get a ward up at the 6-minute mark, because you can't just like plan ahead on it. You're going to have to wait till, like, you basically have to buy wards at the start of the game, and then 6 minutes later, it's going to get restocked. Max stock is still 2, so this is like really going to make it hard to have vision in the early game. Normally, you would have 2 wards that you could buy. You could buy the second ward at 6. Like, you would still have that extra ward sitting there as a stock, but now it's going to be like constantly on cooldown. I can pretty much guarantee you. So we'll most likely only see observer wards up 2 at a time, and this also is going to hurt people that aren't consistent with ward purchases. People are going to take like ward purchase timers now, because if they forget and then try to buy them later, it's not like there's this overlap. Like, the max stock is still 2, I guess, so I guess it's not going to be as big of a deal, but more likely we'll see people buying wards every 6 minutes, I would expect. I think that's the cooldown. I think it's 6, if I'm not mistaken. Can target Observer and Sentry wards, dealing 100 damage. Wards have 200 HP. This is on a Quelling Blade, and the cast range is increased. So this basically means that you can now use Quelling Blade on wards if you're a melee hero. So this encourages melee supports to be in the game, because melee supports often dewarding. We actually played a game just the other day where we played an in-house, and we did all random, I think, and we had 5 melee, so we couldn't even kill their wards on the high ground. There was like no way unless we had a Blink Dagger or something. It was really shitty. But I still don't see a support behind Quelling Blades, but it does allow melee heroes to take them out, and they'll just have to cast the Quelling twice. It'll cast do 100 damage, and then you have to wait like 3 seconds or 4 seconds, and you'll cast it again and kill it. Radiant Slight buff, burn damage, so we'll probably see Radiance be used on Lone Druid again. Sanjin Yasha getting slight buffs. Basically, it's making everything 16 instead of weird numbers, so extra attack speed, extra maim chance, damage goes up by 4. Probably still won't see Sanjin Yasha built, except for on like Lifestealer, but we'll see. Sentry Ward AoE decreased slightly, so this is going to change dewarding a little bit. And it's basically a slight buff to Invis heroes, so... Shadow Amulet, Fade Time is decreased again. Already the item's not that good. Shadow Blade is obviously great, but the Shadow Amulet doesn't do a whole lot. So, Shiva's Guard Aura AoE decreased from 1000 to a standard 900. The attack speed reduction increased from 30 to 40, so this is pretty big. It's going to reduce your opponent's attack speed. This was originally 25, by the way, and Shiva's Guard is almost never picked up, so this is really going to reduce your opponent's attack speed. It's pretty cool. And Corruption Armor reduction increased from 6 to 7, so another buff to Stygian Desolator. Or the Desolator, that is. Veil of Discord AoE increased very slightly. That AoE is already pretty big, so this is a pretty nice buff. And a couple small things. Captain's mode picking is different now, so instead of doing the last style, it will now do 4 bans, then you'll do 4 picks, and then you'll do 4 bans, and then you'll do 4 picks, and then you'll do 2 bans, and then you'll do 2 picks. This means a little bit easier to counterpick your opponents, especially in the last 2. Like the 3 ban at the end is kind of nice, but it's usually a little bit of a crapshoot. You're just kind of picking random heroes, so... Especially the last 2 picks are actually going to be pretty easy to counterpick. It's going to be harder for people to just like it'll be easier to see what your opponents are drafting, because by the second set of picking, you'll still have 4 of your heroes, but you'll probably better be able to guess what the last pick is. So it'll be harder for them to just throw in a surprise carry or something. You'll be able to predict it, and it might throw some drafts into some whack, which I think is kind of cool because it's kind of fun to throw that drafting element in where you can just outdraft your opponents with the last pick. I think that might make things really cool. Should hurt inexperienced teams a little bit more. And also the total pick and ban time is a little bit less. It's about 80 seconds less, which means that there should be a little bit less downtime at the beginning of the game. So really nice encouragements to make the metagame and the pro scene more fun to watch. So I really like this. Alright, some slight changes to EXP and gold gain. Not really that worth looking at. Buyback cooldown increased by 1 minute, so buyback is nerfed a bit. I don't have the numbers on this. I would have to do math on this to see how significant this is, but deny EXP and bonus EXP gold AoE is now the same as regular EXP. This is a pretty big deal. So that means that if somebody denies a creep, it's the same as the EXP gain. So you might not have noticed this before, but basically if a creep was denied, it's a slightly smaller AoE than if it was not last hit. So that means that you have a better chance of getting EXP if you're in the off lane, essentially. Or even in the regular lane, honestly. I think this means more EXP in the early game, I guess. That's what it looks like. Gold for ending a spree changed to be a lot higher, actually. 3 times to 10 times. Wow, that's really big. So, better comeback possibilities. I think that's pretty legitimate, honestly. It's really hard to come back in Dota right now. It would be kind of fun to have slightly better comeback possibilities. Is that the right thing to say? I'm not sure. Towers have more armor at level 1 and level 2. They have no longer... That's not that important. And a last hit tower gives... Okay. So this is actually pretty important. Does not affect team bounty in any way. Let me think. Does this mean that you... Getting a last hit on tower is actually really big now. This is more intuitive, I think, because this is kind of what people thought it was in the first place. Getting a last hit on tower gives 100 to 200 bonus gold. It does not affect the team bounty in any way. So no matter how the tower dies, your team's going to get the same gold, right? Previously, if you get a last hit, your team would get no team bounty, and the allies get slightly less gold. Now, allies always get the same amount, regardless of who gets last hit. A hero last hitting gets roughly the same overall amount as before. So I think this means that you need a last hit, if I'm not mistaken. You would get no team bounty, which previously, if you get the last hit, nobody would get team bounty. Allies get slightly less gold. I don't know exactly how this works. It's slightly confusing to me. They always get the same amount regardless of who last hits. Your last hitting gets roughly the same overall amount as before. But if you miss it, probably get the same. I think that means you definitely need a last hit now if possible. Backdoor protection also reduces incoming damage by 25. This is pretty cool. So if somebody backdoors the tower, they have some damage reductions. It makes it harder to backdoor towers, which is cool. Siege units HP increase by 550. This is pretty big. If you're having trouble last hitting under a tower, it means that the tower will always take 4 hits to kill a tower instead of 3, sometimes 4. So you could get unlucky that way. This might mean that you have to butter up a siege. We'll have to see. 50 HP on fortified armor is probably more than enough. You'll probably have to last hit a siege creep once before the tower hits it the 4th time. If it takes some creep damage, this also means that you'll probably be able to still last hit it off of 3 tower hits. So this means that last hitting siege creeps under tower is probably going to be easier. So this is overall good, I think. Swapping a hero that you random now costs 100 gold, and repicking a random hero now re-adds the hero to your pool. So I think that's about it. Yep, that's it. Unless you guys want to read in Chinese, let's go through the whole thing. I have no idea what this says. Added Aghanim Scepter to Ancient Apparition. I just instantly learned Chinese, guys. Let's see something else. Bloodseeker Rupture now goes through magic immune units. See, I'm learning pretty fast. Okay, so that's it for the changelog. I think that took like an hour, but I hope you guys enjoyed everything. That's my thoughts of everything. Lots of cool changes. There's usually a patch like 2 or 3 times a year. It's like Christmas every time it happens. Thanks IceFrog for balancing everything. I mean, honestly, if you guys are pretty new to Dota, this is why Dota continues to be such a competitive and fun game to watch and play, because things that are slightly overpowered will get nerfed. Heroes that are underpowered will get buffed. So even your favorite heroes that aren't in the metagame might get played soon, and it should really adapt things. So it helps you learn mechanics as well. You learn a lot of numbers and stuff like that. Just makes the game so fun to play. So love reading patch notes. So can't wait to play some more games. I'll try to play some today. The studio things are dying down here, so pretty soon everybody's going to be gone and it's going to be empty-ish, and I will have lots of time to make videos. So hopefully I can keep the video content up, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, go follow me on Facebook or Twitter at Purge Gamers. And I think that's about all I want to say. I'm trying to think. I'll probably do my t-shirt contest soon, or look into that, and I think that's it. Okay, goodbye guys.